we're live. I do believe we're live. At the very least, we're going to keep talking anyway, like we are live.
You are.
So after much testing, unlike testing race cars, we tested electronics, and y'all missed what would have been an awesome show because we have Mr. Bret Kepner back again tonight. We had an awesome conversation while figuring out what was wrong with our connection last week. But the truth is, we don't know what we did to fix it, but it's fixed. And we got him on here, and I am just going to immediately just pop him right back in here. 3, 1, boom, there you are. You're back. And we can hear you.
And I think we approached it exactly like a race car because we ran over the crank 3 times, didn't know why, changed everything, and it worked, and we don't know why.
That's for sure. You know, that you're dead on correct with that because I have done it many times where you blow the thing up and you think, well, it could be this or it could be this, but let's change everything to make sure it don't happen.
Exactly. The cardinal rule of race car testing: change at least 3 things at once. That's right.
That's for sure. That is for sure, no doubt about it. But man, I don't know what we had trouble with last week. Doesn't matter. But I'm going to tell everybody right now, we're going to try to stick to an hour tonight because when I finish,
Clay has to drive from Millington, Tennessee to Spartanburg, South Carolina in less than an hour.
That's right. That's right. I'm going live on the Monday Morning Racer on Competition Plus Facebook page. As soon as me and Bret finish, I think I'm going to be on there with Stevie Fast and Scotty Cannon. So that ought
to be a damn good show. Beats the hell out of this one.
No, I don't know about that. I mean, obviously, I was so into this. This is the 3rd time we're doing it, and very glad you're here and back again tonight. And
My pleasure.
Since I just said the name Scotty Cannon, what do you think of when I say Scotty Cannon? I mean, just kind of like what pops in your mind?
You know, there's a real simple bucket you can throw Scotty Cannon in. Scotty Cannon is an example of the Don Prudhomme, Bob Glidden, Don Garlits type of racer. When Scotty Cannon was winning everything under the planet or under the sun and could not be beaten, all racers did was complain, demand rules changes to make him, as slow as they were, and disallow equipment that he was trying that they hadn't gotten to yet. And the only you of all people know the answer to this question. What was the only thing that made Scotty Cannon different from all of that?
I can tell you exactly what it was. He worked harder, he tested more, and he was not afraid to try anything.
But the bottom line is he did this 24 hours a day.
Absolutely.
That's the difference between him and a hobby racer, a guy who made millions at some company during the week and just, flew in and drove a race car that somebody else tuned during the weekend. Scotty Cannon, he lives in Greer, South Carolina, there right next to Greer, South Carolina, where there's a drag strip. And he would literally work in his restaurant and get an idea and drive or walk a mile up the road to the drag strip and go test it that minute. He had access to the drag strip, and that's all he did was test, work. And that's what made him better. That's just, like I said, the exact same thing as Don Garlits, Don Prudhomme, Bob Glidden. They just worked more. That's all it is.
Plain and simple.
That's what I think of Scotty Cannon.
Yep. That's what I think too. I mean, that and, growing up watching him with a golf cart with nitrous on it, doing wheelies in the parking lot.
Yep.
Now, ain't no doubt they worked hard, but holy moly, did they know how to party hard too?
You're not going to bring up the washing machines?
Nah, you can tell that though. I wouldn't bring up the washing machines, but let's hear it.
Scotty Cannon used to have. Well, you know what? I was going to say they used to have parties and do this, but the honest truth is, a lot of his guys in his shop would work because he worked them into the ground, and they were willing to do it because they were on top of the world at that time. They'd work in the shop, and they'd get, just pent up, they're just beat and they're wrecked from work and so on. And they relaxed by going out back of the shop and using, shall we say, not semi-automatic weapons, on washing machines.
Yes. Again, they know how to
A
have
great stress reliever if there ever was one. But that's what they used to do at Scotty Cannon Shop. For all I know, they still do it.
Yeah, it's probably happens to this day, no doubt about it. I mean, no doubt he's a very unique story, a guy that basically started with absolutely nothing and did it all. I mean, he did it all. Went from good old Greer, South Carolina, where you park on a hill, your trailer's leaned over, and everything tries to fall out of your trailer because it's on such a slope.
Yep.
And you
I
know,
worked for a lot of years for Mike Greer. Truth be told, it was the last place I ever announced. But I consider Mike and his family my family, and they're just wonderful people, and that's why they opened up the track to Scotty. They're just that kind of person. Scotty, said, "Can I come test?" And they're like, "Here's the keys.
right,
Lock it up when you leave." But yeah, it's a neat little track.
Yeah, it really is. I used to go there all the time, the IHRA points races, and
Right.
there for a long time. There were, so many when I raced in modified eliminator and quick rod and all the classes that I ran in. It was funny how we would do that because back then it was airline. What was the name of that thing? Value Jet. You remember Value Jet?
I remember what happened to Value Jet.
Yes. So I was driving forklift at Kroger, and I would leave my stuff at Kevin Scales' house. He would drop me off. Well, I would leave my trailer, and I would drive my old dually to Barnett Performance in downtown.
Yeah.
Yep. And I would walk, catch the MARTA train to the airport, and it was like $65 round trip to fly Memphis to Atlanta. Well, I couldn't drive my dually home for that.
Right.
And we would do that all summer long, just catch those $65 flights. And the next thing you know, Value Jet had a slight problem of airplanes falling out of the sky, and it went away. And
they didn't do good flying over the Everglades. I remember that.
No, that's for sure. That is for sure. So on our first show, I had a lot of people, and I know you did. You looked at some of the comments, but somebody sent in to ask you about a racetrack called Graceland. What is that?
Oh, Graceland.
Yeah.
Good God. 1985. Bunch of racers and me sitting around bored in the middle of the winter at my house. It was me, Greg Fisher, Bill Rowe Jr., Brant Hansen, Todd Hansen, Greg Moss, Neil Beckley, a huge number of St. Louis racers that I could just go on naming. Got bored, and we decided to start. We decided to put together an HO slot car track and drag race. I'm going to skip this whole story and go directly to the end, which was 1994, when we finished. I guess it would have been the 7th or 8th full season association. Hoorah is the acronym. And I think the final year that we raced, we paid something on the order of $30,000 worth of purses that year.
Slot car racing.
Slot car racing. And everybody, I can't even name the big name racers that showed up for that thing. Bill Coolman, Animal Jim, all kinds of people used to come down and race from that. We had people who used to drive down. Kevin McKenna used to drive down from Chicago to race once a week. And we had a full schedule. It was, I think, Tuesday or Wednesday night during the winter. And the only reason I moved out of that house and the only reason we didn't continue it was I didn't have room for parking.
No kidding.
Yeah, we had 20 or 30 people a week. And the place that we started having this had plenty of space, fields and stuff around the house. And in fact, we had the cops show up early on, wondering what the hell was going on in the house because all the cars parked. And the cops came in and they watched and they realized what we were doing. And they saw that we were doing it for money, but it wasn't any sizable amount of money.
Right.
They were more. The cops were more interested in why we had multiple numbers of gram scales because we had a rule book And the
Sure.
cars had to be weighed and stuff. So we used gram scales, which of course were the measuring equipment of choice for drug runners, so that was the most gram scales the cops had ever seen in one place at one time. But other than that, they were fine with it. So that's the story. That's the story of Graceland.
So was this a drag race or circuit track?
No, it was drag race. It was 19.56 feet because it was 160. It wasn't 164th like everybody said HO was. We figured it out by averaging the wheelbases of different cars that it was like 168th. And I will tell you this, when we stopped racing, and this is really nothing nowadays because, slot car racing has had a pretty big resurgence rate recently. 0 to 20 feet for all intents and purposes. 0.27 seconds at 73 miles an hour.
Holy moly.
Yeah, you really couldn't see them anymore.
Right. So I'm assuming this was heads up. First one to the end, no
in fact, we didn't have handicap racing, but we ran index racing. We had a 1 second flat index class. We had a 0.7 second index class. We ran on a 1/10 of a second pro tree, and people could go red because we were using micro switches.
Yep.
And those cars running on electric current are instantaneous in their reaction to the switch. So you get rid of everything from, the brain to the ankle to the gas pedal to the carburetor to the transmission to the drive shaft to the rear wheels lag. And like I said, you could go red on a 1/10 pro tree.
I'll be dang. So you had a timing system then?
We had a very, very, very early timing system that a local guy named Mike Kelm built. Yeah.
So strangely enough, I was going to mention his name because that's who sent that in, Mike Kelm.
Oh. Well, there you go, Kelm. He's listening right now.
Yeah. Dukas wanted to know what you prepped the track with.
Yeah. Was there track prep or was this no prep?
We used VHT.
Really?
Yeah. It was I used to spend probably an hour. See, what happened was after a couple of years, Mike Kelm built his own track on the north side of St. Louis, and we would alternate weeks. And his track we referred to as the Motorplex because it was substantially quicker than my plastic HO track because he built his specifically. And I was going to say, both Mike and I used to spend probably at least a half an hour before we opened each week prepping the track.
I'll be dang.
Yeah.
So this was like serious. You said 30 grand. It was. So you had guys, pro racers that were like hopping up electric motors and everything else.
Right. One of the winningest bracket racers, probably, one of the two winningest racers out of St. Louis, a guy named Steve Pearson, had a Vega in real drag racing. He raced a Vega super gas car. It was actually an ex-pro stocker of Del Sutton's that Bill Coolman used to drive back in the 70s. On the back of his Vega, it was written, thanks to Hoorah Racing, because we paid for half of that car.
No way.
Yeah, and we used to do it, I think we started Thanksgiving weekend and we finished like the end of February, and everybody was pretty much accustomed to racing when the drag strips opened because we'd been doing that all winter.
That's cool. I just seen a comment that rolled by. So the slot car racing was paying more than NHRA top fuel.
If you converted 1980 dollars to today dollars, it's probably close. But we had a points fund and we didn't pilfer it.
Oh man. Boom. Boom. So I've been thinking about this, and you don't have to answer right this moment. It's one of those things that I think about a lot. And me and Mike Clover, my crew chief, we've had a lot of conversations.
I hope
about a lot. But this is kind of it ain't even fantasy land. It's a legit thing. I'm actually setting my questions down for this one. So you have been there, done this as much or more than anybody that I know, and you're not that old because we're not that far apart in age. If there was,
keep telling yourself that, Clay.
Yeah, I know I'm old too, but I'm saying we're not old to Don. Is what I'm saying.
I tell people that I'm 62, and they go, "No, you're not." You tell people
Right.
that you're, what are you, 58?
54. 54.
54, yeah. And people
Yep.
don't believe that you're over 30. People think I'm 10 years older than I am, and people think you're 20 years younger than you are. So I don't want to hear about us being the same.
Well, I mean, we're not that far apart, but
Back to your Clover conversation.
back to my thing. So, what could be done to make drag racing, specifically the pro racing, to where you can do it and actually? What would you do? Like, all right, I'm starting my own thing. What would Bret's perfect scenario be? Because to me, we've kind of played out what we're doing right now. Like, I think we need to do something differently. I'm not saying necessarily change the cars, that sort of thing, because I think they're still the most exciting thing there is to watch in person. But I think a lot of times that we have gotten to the point to where that it is just almost impossible to do this anymore.
Are you talking from a financial standpoint?
Yeah, financially, it's so hard to do, but it's got to be,
Well, there's a very simple answer to this. This isn't going to be a long discussion. There's only one thing you can do to stop whatever has happened in any class, and that's make them a 100% spec class. Make it so that people can't spend any money. Simple as that. Otherwise, you are going to have the natural evolution of psychotic bastards who will do anything to win.
Yep.
And that's what happens to drag racing. That's what happens to any competitive sport. That's when the Scotty Cannons, Don Perdome's, Don Garlitz's, and Bob Glidden's come out, everything gets ruined. Because not everybody can spend all that time in this. But you can't blame the guys that do, because it's not illegal to.
Right. I mean,
so
if
you just create a spec class where every single car is the same, then you got something to work with. Then you have some way to penalize people for being better.
I don't even really know that that's my question.
Okay.
What, again, if you could just kind of do it, would you come up with a pay-per-view scenario where you're not like necessarily depending on Fox, so to speak? Would it be change up how we race?
It's actually been proven, but the sport cannot survive on pay-per-view. Drag racing, there's one thing, Clay, that people as deep in the woods as you and I are constantly forget. I'm not saying I'm a better person because I know this. I'm saying it's something that I have to force myself to remember all the time. And that is this. It's only drag racing.
Right. Yep.
This is not NASCAR. This is not anything but drag racing. And drag racing ain't that big of a deal in this world. No, and I'm talking 2019 world.
Right.
Obviously, nothing's a big deal in 2020, but in 2019, it's just drag racing. So a pay-per-view situation is completely out of the question. You'd be stunned at how few people buy the NHRA pay-per-view deal.
Yeah. No.
What about making a better show?
Yeah, that's. I'm not necessarily saying any of these things. What would you think would be something that
Donna, help me out. What's he saying?
I think he wants to know what would make a better show to get more people to come out.
I mean,
you're not talking TV show. You're talking about show at the event.
All of drag racing in general. You're suddenly the king of drag.
You're gonna hate this, but I don't see a problem.
Well, I'm not saying there is, but I'm just saying, what can we do to grow it? What can we do?
I don't see a problem. I think the National Hot Rod Association, because that's the only place that's running the pro show that we're talking about, has done a pretty astonishing job in the last 70 years of getting it to this point. Now, I will say one thing that will be incredibly unpopular. You and I have seen the attention span of spectators change drastically through, well, you and I have both watched, I guess, 3 generations now. We saw the end of one, certainly all of another, and we're seeing a new one now.
Yep.
The attention span has changed from when you and I were kids, and we we'd literally run when they opened the gates to go grab a seat at sunrise, and we wouldn't leave until the last dog. People don't do that anymore. We've seen that change to a 6 or 7 hour attention span to what is right now. You can literally set your watch by it, a 2.5 hour attention span at an NHRA national event. You see it all the time. If they get there in time for the first round, they're gone immediately after the semis, sometimes before that. And the National Hot Rod Association has done a tremendous job of getting everything down on Sunday to the only classes that people pay to see, and that's Top Fuel, Funny Car, Top Fuel and Funny Car. And I'm not intentionally leaving out Pro Mod and Pro Stock because people don't pay to see them. We know exactly how many people a Pro Stock race will draw. We know exactly how many people a Pro Mod race will draw. Yes, there are people that go to any international events who also like those classes. There's a very, very, very small group of people that like only Pro Stock and Pro Mod and don't like the fuel cars. So we have to address the majority of human beings here who are paying to see the fuel cars.
Yep.
And the NHRA's program now, in which we run the first round at 11 o'clock, we're 10 this year, first round at 11 o'clock in the morning, followed immediately by the second round, narrowing those 2 rounds into what is, under normal circumstances, a 2 hour round.
Yep.
A 2 hour presentation of the first and the second round of the 2 classes. That's pretty incredible when you think about it with 2 16-car fields. Now, the fact that the TV shows are 3 hours has been met with different opinions. The reason the NHRA likes doing it for 3 hours is because they actually get a chance to expand the the sponsors' viewership numbers. They also get a chance to make a little bit more money on selling a little bit more advertising, even though they have to split that with Fox. And they, for all intents and purposes, just get to obliterate the fans with a 3 hour show. A lot of people don't watch 3 hours of drag racing. A lot of people, even hardcores, can't watch 3 hours of drag racing. And the network, even though things have changed a little bit in 2020 and certainly have changed for 2021, the network was never a huge fan of having 3 hours of anything other than baseball and football. This is the part that I said was going to be unpopular. At this point in the sports evolution, I would heavily advocate 8-car fuel fields. The reason being, you've instantly got a 2 hour show. First round at noon, second round at 1 or 1:15, third round at 3, or you know what I'm saying, 1, 2, and 3. 12, 1, and 2 is what the same was in my mind. You could run around every hour with 8 cars. It would be hard for the racers, but then you've got a legitimate live television show.
Yeah.
Now, unfortunately, it's going to go long, and you're going to miss your final round a lot of times. But at least get those first 2 rounds in an hour or in an hour and a half. Right. So my answer to your question is, I don't see a problem. The National Hot Rod Association sold out 13 times in 2019, so there is no real problem. And the only thing I see right now is, as much as I hate to say it, and believe me, I don't want to see an 8-car field. I just realized that an 8-car field would be the answer to a lot of problems. So there.
I have the finger.
Well, I'm going to say something that I think is not popular too. I kind of like the 2-day race schedule where you qualify one day, you race the next day. I kind of like the 2 shots, or possibly maybe do a third one, because there's going to be some top tier people not going to get in. And that's exciting.
I don't know if you could hear all that or not, but basically Donald.
I did. And I have a comment on that. I think you guys know this. I'm going to guarantee that most of the listeners don't. In the last 10 days, there was a revolution of sorts from a variety of tracks, even in the middle of this mess, who said, we want our Fridays back. In other words, the National Hot Rod Association's 2-day schedule cut back 33% possible income of a lot of the tracks. There are some tracks that did really good on Fridays. Not all of them, but they certainly, drew a crowd on Fridays.
Oh, yeah.
But there were some that did really good on Fridays. And those tracks went to Glenn Cromwell just in the last 10 days and said, we need a Friday. And they won. NHRA gave them back their Fridays. It's going to be one session.
What do you think it would?
Go ahead.
Do you think it would be a 2-day Friday, Saturday, or just?
No.
What he's saying is these tracks are saying they want Friday,
3 days.
They want
Yeah.
all 3 days.
Yeah.
One lap on Friday, 2 laps
Friday
on
night.
Saturday, and then eliminations on Sunday. And to answer your question, Don, I personally think the 2-day deal was fantastic. I think, Luigi Novelli should have been doing handstands when they said 2 sessions. And I'm not picking on Luigi.
Right.
It's just typical of Luigi. If he's there and you give Schumacher 3 laps, he's done.
Oh, yeah.
Ain't gonna happen. He's lucky if he can make 2. So, I think the 2-day deal was a neat change up. I think it was exciting. It was weird, but that's just change. It didn't have anything to do with what they were doing. So the bottom line is, some events next year will be 2 days. Indy will be 3. Indy will be one of the ones that has the Friday session. So I think that it's very interesting that Indy went ahead and had 3 when other tracks only had 2, considering the National Hot Rod Association owns Indy. But we won't go into that.
So I have multiple feelings about the 2-day show, the 2 qualifying runs. As the guy that gets to put the helmet on, the more times I get to stomp on the loud pedal, obviously the more I like it, and it helps the tuner, all those things. On the guy that don't pay the bills but see the bills, it was a huge cost savings for the teams.
Yeah.
And that kind of goes back to earlier when I was trying to, what do we need to do to make drag racing better or whatever. I agree with you. I think NHRA, all things considered, has done a great job. I do miss IHRA to where there is competition, where if you got a fuel car, you can go run it over there. I absolutely loved my time in IHRA, and it was a legitimate program back in those days. It was a legitimate program when you were there. I hate that it's gone. And
hey, I go back farther than you. I did many years. I was the announcer for AHRA, which was its own world, and a very, very competitive and very cool world. I think, I could be wrong, but I think I actually announced for the UDRA longer than any other association that I've worked with. I guess that would end up being something like 23 or 24 years. And UDRA, again, was its own little world. And UDRA was a very compact deal. So there's a variety of different ways to do this, all of which failed.
Yeah, exactly.
The only thing that's left is the NHRA, and it's not because everybody else was so good. It's because everybody else failed.
Yep. So I want your opinion on Street Outlaws. Good, bad?
Stop right there. Never watched it.
Never watched it.
Nope.
So
I have an idea of what's going on, and it's just grudge racing. Now, if you ask me about how I feel about grudge racing, right now, grudge racing is what's holding the sport together.
Yep.
Grudge racing is the biggest gate there is for the vast majority of tracks that do have grudge racing. There's a couple of different ways that tracks are surviving right now. The mom and pop tracks that have for lack of better words, guaranteed turnout for their bracket program. In other words, they can bank on having 100 cars every week. And again, I'm talking mom and pop tracks, not because they're mom and pop tracks, but because they're small and they don't have much overhead.
Right.
That's the difference, the real difference between a mom and pop track and a corporate track. The mom and pop tracks that can guarantee 100 cars or so every week for bracket racing, they're sticking with bracket racing, and for good reason, because it's guaranteed. With a grudge race, you pretty much have to gamble as a promoter, you know, put up some money, get some names, whatever, and then hope the weather holds and hope everybody shows up and hope nobody breaks, and et cetera, et cetera. But if you're a promoter and a gambler, grudge racing right now is the biggest return. You know, it's not uncommon for grudge racing, even at the smallest tracks right now, drawing 2,000 people. And 1,000 is the big number for any promoter to draw at. Forget all the numbers that you've ever heard out there, people, including national event seating. 1,000 paid spectators at $10 a pop is a big deal for a small track.
Yep.
And at $15, it's 50% more of a big deal.
Exactly.
But like I said, a grudge race that draws 2,000 people is huge. They just had a Street Outlaws deal at Sykeston a couple of weeks ago. At 1,600 people at that little place.
Yep.
It's a track in Sykeston, Missouri. I apologize to the listeners. It's a place that Clay and I are both very familiar with. A little tiny track that most people don't even know exists. Larry Jeffers, the chassis builder, actually owns the track. So go ahead. If that was my answer to your Street Outlaws question.
No. I mean, I just wanted to know your opinion on it. I mean, for me, I
have none.
I just think that overall, it has been a very big boost to drag racing and those tracks you just mentioned. And I think it's taken kids that didn't really know what drag racing is and has made them start to pay attention. And that's my opinion of Street Outlaws. Yeah,
the ratings have been great. They certainly can draw a crowd. So, you know, I don't see a problem. I just don't know anything about it.
Right. No, that's fine. But I mean,
I follow the guys that are on it too. I do follow the cars and the results because a surprising number of those guys race in conventional events.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, you got a guy like Mike Murillo who's won all kinds of things.
Exactly. Yeah.
He's obviously way more known for being on Street Outlaws than the 7 or 8 championships he's won.
Tragically true. Yes.
Crazy.
Like you, you're a 2-time NHRA national event winner, right? You know, forget about the other 54.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly right. Exactly right.
I did that. I did the 2 just to piss you off. So
yeah, that's okay. That's all right. So this guy's going to come in. You may have heard of him. His name's Kenny Nowlings. You might have heard of this guy. No.
Okay.
He says, ask Bret about doing voiceovers for ADRL shows in the back of a car with the late great Bubba Barnes.
That wasn't necessarily an ADRL show. Bubba and I, the late great Bubba Barnes was the Mr. Everything of Masters Entertainment Productions TV production company that I worked with for 30 years. And Bubba did everything. He was the cameraman. He was the editor. He was the crew chief. He was the everything. And he was also an incredible drag racing fan. He knew what he was doing. Did I freeze up?
No, you're good.
Well, it froze up on my phone. I guess my phone blew up. Let me know if I screw up.
Nope, you're good.
Anyway, Bubba was my partner for at least 20 years with Masters. And we did what was known as meatball video. It's a joke off of the old MASH TV show about meatball surgery. You know, you're not there to make it pretty. You're just there to get it done and move on to the next one. Yeah. And that's what Inside Drag Racing was. It was a half-hour show that was on for 25 years, and we would go to different events, just me and Bubba, and we would get out of the rental car, look around, and do a half-hour TV show. And a lot of times, as soon as we were done with that show, Bubba had to go directly back to the studio and put it together to make it a show to send it to ESPN. Inside Drag Racing was on a couple of networks, but it was on ESPN for about 15 years. And it was a weekly half-hour show. But anyway, it was not unusual for Bubba and I to shoot the event, one camera. Of course, I'd do a couple of interviews and some top-end deals and some pit pieces and some other stuff. But the show would have to be put together and then done what we call a voiceover in the studio to just kind of make everything come together. You know, since we just didn't have the time to do that most of the time, we would get in the rental car, close the doors, roll up the windows, make the rental car a studio, and I would do the voiceover to the show from memory in the car.
Oh, man.
And then Bubba could leave the event and go back and just have to put it together, you know, normally. It was a very weird way to do things, but it worked. And we did that a lot.
So Donna said this quietly back there. Do you know the name Sheldon Cooper from Big Bang Theory?
Yeah, the character, sure, yeah.
The character, yeah. Donna, I think, is leaning towards you might have a what's he called? Eidetic memory. Have you ever been told that you may have an eidetic memory because you seem to just not forget squat, brother?
It sounds close to having an idiot memory, and I've been accused of that, yes.
Oh, so you mentioned rental car. I definitely want to get to.
All right, let's get one thing straight here. People accuse me of destroying rental cars. There are two different situations that have to be looked at here. One is, let's hope nobody's important is watching this, but I race rental cars. Most people who know about my racing career know that I race rental cars. And I've raced a lot of rental cars. I would always get the same type of car, whatever was a good bracket car at the time. There was quite a while, maybe 93, 4, 5 in that area, where I used to race sedan DeVilles because they were the quickest thing you could rent, and they didn't spin the tires very much. I spent a lot of time in the Taurus Sable platform because those cars really did work. As long as I got the low horsepower version, there was a high horsepower version that would spin the tires, but as long as I got the low horsepower version, they were I won a lot of money with those cars. So if I got a car to rent to race it, I treated it like gold. It's the weekends that I wasn't racing that the rental cars were in trouble. So which type of weekend would you like to discuss?
Both, actually.
Both?
Oh, of course.
Okay, ask a question.
Well, I mean, how about, I'm going to try to pull Sheldon Cooper on you. 2005 World Series of Drag Racing, that probably wasn't in a rental car. That was probably
No, it was in my own car. Yeah.
That was in your own car. But that was not.
I won the World Series 3 times, which I'm very proud of. I got runner-up one time. And those were, all but one were in my car. One was in Mary Ann's brand new Honda that had never been run anywhere. She had just gotten it a couple of weeks, maybe a week before the race. But no, those were in personal cars. So
rental car, best weekend you ever had in a rental car? Just like
you're going to bring that. It's a rudimentary Clay Millican story is what it is. There have been good weeks. I've won national events in rental cars. I've never won an NHRA or an IHRA national event in a rental car. That honor goes to somebody you know, and I bet you will be floored when you find out who it is. There's a person who won the IHRA Winter Nationals with a Chrysler K-Car station wagon. And you of all people know, that you know what happens when you win a legal class at a national event. What happens?
They tear you down.
They tear you down. And he tore down a rental car. Didn't have gaskets with him, of course.
Of course.
So he tore it down and left it torn down overnight. Then Monday morning went to a parts store, bought all the gaskets, went back to the track, put the car back together, drove it to the airport, and got on his plane and went home.
Holy crap.
And who was
And
it?
and that person was Edward O'Reilly,
Wow.
my announcing partner from the IHRA for decades. He
Wow.
won, I think it was the 19, he's going to burn me on this one. I think it was 1975, but I could be wrong. I don't even think they made K cars in 75, so that couldn't be right.
I don't know.
Must have been in the early 80s. And he's
Yeah.
going to kill me for this, but I think the world of Ed O'Reilly. I mean, I think he's one of the most amazing people I've ever met in my life, but that put him over the top. That made him superhuman in my eyes.
That's crazy. But I mean, what got you started on that path? I mean, why take your street
What got me
car?
started on racing rental cars?
Yeah, rental cars, your street car. I mean, like we talked about, you did a little racing that was kind of a race car, but like you become Mr. Dirt. I mean, you become the guy. I mean, you were like at the leading edge of. And I hate to get into the drag racing school just yet, but you like got on a mission to take standard cars and go and beat real race cars. You did it.
This will lead you in. This will lead you into the school. I raced from 1976 until I guess the last time would have been 1983. And between 80 and 83, it didn't have a heck of a lot of time. I only raced when I could. Prior to that, I had a couple of legal cars. I had an L-stock automatic 66 Barracuda. I had an O-stock automatic 70 Fury 2. And then even in 83, the last race I ran in 83 was with a Q-stock automatic Olds Delta 88, which were really cool cars for stock eliminator. And I won the last race that I ran in 83. And the reason that was a quote last race end quote is because beginning in 84, I started the TV stuff.
Yeah.
So I just didn't have the time.
Right.
Just did not have the time to race. In 1990, I was getting really sick of hearing people for the last 3 years bitch about delay boxes, which, as you're well aware, came around roughly in 85, 86, really got saturated in the sport in 87. And a lot of people don't remember that the National Hot Rod Association allowed the delay boxes in 85 and 86 in stock, super stock, and every other class.
Yeah, I didn't remember that.
Yeah. And they didn't boot them until either 87 or 88. But anyway, I got so sick of hearing bracket racers bitch about how they could not beat delay boxes. Delay boxes should be banned. They're ruining the sport. They're killing everything, blah, 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 blah. And again, I hadn't raced in a while, but I kept thinking to myself, I understood how they worked. And if it's just a guy releasing a button, it's no different than what you're doing with your foot. And you couldn't really compare it to just running a trans brake because a lot of people weren't doing that yet.
Right.
I honestly think the trans brake came in as a part of the delay box before it came in as just a way to launch the car. So anyway, in 91, I had a Corvette that I just bought from Carl Moyer. It's Carl's personal 76 Corvette with 3,000 miles on it or something insane. And it was a collector's car. It was 1976 L48, the slowest Corvette ever built. And it really was 180 horsepower, 3,800 pound car.
Yeah.
That's pretty horrible.
It's a turtle.
But as luck would have it, because it was a slug, it couldn't spin the tires.
Yep.
So I thought to myself, I need to go see what this thing runs. So I took it over to St. Louis International Raceway one time. It was Gateway at that time. It had just changed. And this is still the old track. And made some runs with it. And Steve Pearson, the guy we talked about earlier with the Vega, he comes over to me. He says, "You should run this thing tonight." And I said, "It's been 5-6 years since I really ran in an eliminator." He says, "Give it a shot." So I gave it a shot. Ended up winning. And I started looking at those complaints and realizing, I was thinking about it all night long, and I started realizing there is no magic bullet over there. There's no delay box. I was running in a delay box class that night, and I thought there's there's nothing serious about what we're doing here. You know, it's just like the old days. If you go to the starting line with a certain package, set up for a certain package, you know, it's up to whoever in the other lane, no matter what they're doing, to hit that package or better. So I started racing. I went on a rampage and started racing all the time, just trying to prove this point. Through Superstock magazine, which of course at that point, God, that would have been 94. So I had worked for Superstock at that point for about 18 years. Steve Collison, the editor, followed what I was doing, bracket racing. You know, he'd ask me all the time on the phone. And he says, you need to do a series. The idea came up to run a point series here in St. Louis that they ran on Wednesday nights, which was an all-encompassed, no-rules bracket class. Anything was legal. Rollout counters, all the stuff that was completely bogus and frowned upon was completely legal. And Steve said, why don't you run the point series? I said, I'm kind of thinking about it. He says, why don't you run the point series and write an article about it? You know, you racing a street car against these delay box cars. And I thought, I really made a decision without thinking about it, because once I did start it, I thought to myself, God, you know, there's a lot of people reading this, because people were sending us letters all the time. And I don't want to be the idiot that goes out there and, you know, proves that everybody was right. Long story short, for those of you who read, and the story was called, or the series was called Giant Killer. And we wrote it in chapters. It was basically each week after I'd race, I'd write a story. I raced under the name Mr. Dirt since the 1970s. A friend of mine gave me that nickname because my L-Stock automatic Barracuda, I never washed it. I was always working on it, but I never washed it. So they called me Mr. Dirt. And I never explained in the magazine article series who I was, because at that time I was that TV idiot, and I didn't want that to influence what people were reading. I wanted them to think that I was just another average donkey, which I am in a Corvette.
With a grocery bag photo.
The grocery bag photo. Exactly. Good memory. So you know what happened on that grocery bag photo?
No.
You remember that?
I don't.
Steve said, you know, send me a picture, you know, of the grocery bag. So I put the grocery bag on. I was wearing my Sonny Leonard's 200-mile-per-hour jacket. It said Bret Kepner right across the front of it.
I didn't remember that.
I couldn't believe it. So anyway, long story short, incredibly long story short, through a series of miracles, I won the points championship, 26-week race, 26-week points championship. I won in 1993. In 1994, Steve says, now go do it again. You know, you can't retire now. They'll consider it a fluke. You got to go out and try it again. So in 1994, I entered the same thing again. I had to fly home a couple of times when I was on the road to race on Wednesday night at my home track, and then go back on the road. But either way, long story short, I won the second year as well. Third year, we were blown out by a guy named Doug Graff, who, by the way, finished in the top 3 of the previous 2 years. Doug Graff had the thing locked in July.
Wow.
So I got my ass kicked in the third year. And I raced it for another 2 or 3 years until they stopped running it. But at that point, at the end of 1994, Keith Gray, who was late great manager of the old St. Louis International Raceway / Gateway International Raceway, was actually the last manager as they were building the new track. He said, I kept bringing up in close conversations the fact that anybody can do this. You know, it's like, God, I don't want this to be a big deal, because I'm just proving that anybody can do this and win. And he said, I'll give you we had an enclosed garage area at the track. He says, I'll give you the garage if you want to, you know, literally start teaching people. And that started the Bret Kepner Drag Racing School in 1995. And that went on through 2010. 750 some graduates, numerous division champions, tons of track champions. I was truly honored to help the winningest top fuel racer of the 1980s, 90s, and double O's when he had a problem. Right?
Fact. I definitely took part in the Bret Kepner drag racing school.
Well, that was a neat deal because you had a real problem that you were led to believe. Let me reword that.
You can say it however you want.
Well, I was going to say you were led to believe that there was a problem on your car that was your fault, and it was really bugging you, and you didn't know how to prove if it was or wasn't. And I had something that I tried, or something that I used in the school on a regular basis. And I said, well, let's try this. And we tried this, and we found out very definitively that it wasn't you. That was really cool. And I know it changed your brain, and that was what you needed.
I need to call you privately.
Donna says she's got to call you privately.
Uh-oh.
About some of my...
I only do drag racing.
Yeah.
Oh, it's about
drag racing. But strangely enough, we were there testing, and you were holding a school, and I told you what we thought was going on, and you're like, make your next lap, come on up here. And man, we got up there and we hit the tree, golly, 4, 5, 6 times, and you.
No, it was 10. It was 10. That's why. I knew by the 5th or 6th one that it wasn't you, but we hit 10. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that was the end of any discussion if I was a problem or not. So strangely enough, I've ran into that since then with crew chiefs I've had since then. It's weird.
Weird, yeah, that is weird.
Yeah.
Well, tell them to call me. I'll fix that.
Exactly. So again, I told y'all we can't run by an hour, but I've got one more thing. We're at 52 minutes and 22 seconds right now.
Okay.
So on this same list of stuff that people sent in, or maybe they called me, this one I'm not going to tell you who it was, but this is what they sent in, called me, text me. But what it says is, what about drinking ketchup through a straws at the Denny's on Route 18 in the first USSC race? Drinking ketchup through a straw. What in the world was going on? Oh my goodness, your sound just went away.
Schaefer for calling me.
Oh, it's back.
It's back. Oh.
In the middle
Your
of this.
sound went away momentarily. Yeah.
Uh-oh, I think I lost you.
No, you're good. You're good.
Back out real quick and come back in.
All right, so while he's gone, y'all, that came. I got to make sure he's out. Okay, so he just topped out. So that came from Lewis Bloom, the stat guy, and the only guy that can probably stat guy and Kepner. I mean, no question about it. Bret Kepner is definitely a Sheldon Cooper.
Let's do the drawing right.
All right, so we're going to do the drawing. Oh wait, he's back. Let me pop him back in here. All right, 3, 2, 1, boom! Drinking ketchup through a straw.
I can only imagine who that was. Bill Pratt?
Nope. You know what? You're a reporter. You don't reveal your sources.
Good point. Although it's a great way to get somebody back. Drinking. Let me tell you about Route 18 at the Denny's. We used to do. You're familiar with the U.S. Super Circuit?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Never run in it.
U.S. Super Circuit was a group of all the people who were going to be stars in Pro Modified when Pro Modified started, but it was 2 years before that. It was the greatest collection of door slammer drivers in the history of the world. It was Bill Coleman. It was Animal Jim. It was Jim Oddie. It was everybody you could name. And we used to go, I was the circuit director for the USSC, and we used to go to tracks all over the place. And we would open our season every year at Maryland International Raceway in Budds Creek, Maryland. And if you've ever been to Budds Creek, Maryland, once you get out of that track on a Saturday night, there is nothing open till Pennsylvania.
Nothing.
The only place that's open is a Denny's on Route 18. I think it's in Waldorf. Bill Pratt can probably correct me on that. Waldorf, Maryland. Well, every time we leave Budds Creek, and as the circuit director, I was always the last guy to leave. We'd all meet at this Denny's, because 9 times out of 10, when we ran at Budds Creek on Saturday night, we had to race at Englishtown on Sunday morning. And that's pretty much a straight through drive. So everybody would stop and get something to eat at the Route 18 Denny's. But everybody's already destroyed, from being up for 20 hours or whatever and racing all night long. And they have an 8-hour drive ahead of them. And then another full day of racing. We used to go to that Denny's, and everybody would just sit around just like this, just dead, just completely dead. And I would always try to get people to perk up because they had a drive ahead of them. And I would do things like put a straw in, I'd take the ketchup off the table, take the lid off, put a straw in it, and suck the ketchup up the straw to the very tip. I wouldn't actually suck any in my mouth, but it would look like I was sucking ketchup out of it with a straw, just to try to wake people up. It was one of the things I did. I will never forget, as long as I live, one of those nights, and if Bill Pratt's listening to this, he was right there with me. I think at the table it was me, Barry Coolman, Al Schmidt, Animal Jim, and Bill Pratt. I guess Bill Coolman had to be somewhere close. And everybody was just staring at the table because everybody was so tired. And Animal Jim, anybody who knows him knows that he's a different kind of guy. Animal Jim was staring at the table, and he, without anybody saying anything else, Animal said, "Why does it have to be a car?" And I looked up and I said, "What?" And he said, he gradually looked up at me and he says, "Why does it have to be a car? What we're racing shouldn't have to be just a car." And I said, "What are you talking about?" He says, "Why can't it be a shark?" I'm going to leave it there because that's the kind of conversations we used to have at that place.
Crazy.
And then everybody would leave the Route 18 Denny's, kind of in a caravan. So you're talking probably 10 teams leaving in a caravan. And me and Bill Pratt would wait for about 20 minutes after they left. And then I would get in my car, either with Bill or he'd be following, and I would drive 20 minutes behind so that I could catch people who were broke down on the road going up.
Yep.
So that I know who was what. Here's a great end to this whole conversation. Because of that grind, there were so many races where people at Englishtown the next day at 4 p.m. were just zombies. I mean, total zombies. And I will never forget a specific final round at Englishtown that was Animal Jim versus Fred Hahn and Jim Otte's car. And Animal was strapped in the car in the staging lanes. There's still some stuff to run ahead of them. And I looked over. I used to coordinate things on the ground. Then I'd run up in the tower and announce. And I looked over, and Animal Jim is strapped in the car and just completely asleep, snoring. And I went over and I tapped him on the shoulder, and he just snapped at me. He just looked up and he goes, "I'm not asleep," like that. And he was obviously incredibly irritated, in that state where you're incredibly irritated because you haven't any sleep. So I said, "Animal, it's time to run." And he's like, "Oh, all right, whatever." Fred Hahn walks, or hadn't been strapped in yet. He walked around the front of his car and walks up to Animal Jim and leans in the door and he goes, "Animal, good luck." And Animal looked at him and said, "You stay in your lane and I'll stay in mine." I'll never forget that as long as we live. The only reason that came up is because you brought up Route 18 Denny's. So there you go. Now get in your car and drive to Spartanburg.
Yes. So we're at the end, and we've got another bobblehead that looks like Kyle Busch. Donna's over here typing names in. You know, we got to do our giveaway here.
And we've had a lot of people wanting part 4.
Yep. So we're definitely going to give this away right quick. Where's it at? Mike Cage. Mike Cage, if you are still tuned in and watching, send me or Donna your address, and we will send you a Kyle Busch bobblehead with wearing my fire suit. Bret, golly, this will not be the last.
I've got an offer for you since we've screwed this up for 3 consecutive weeks. If you have me back, whether it's next week or whatever, at least part of the show, I would like to interview you the way you should have been interviewed before.
Done deal.
Okay.
Done deal.
We've got people asking for part 4.
Yeah, we've got people asking. So let's do this. I've got to get on. Y'all tune in, and as soon as we're done here, tune in to the Competition Plus Facebook page. I'll be on there with Stevie Fast and Scotty Cannon. Bret, let's talk. Let's make that happen. I would absolutely love that because
cool.
Me and you are nowhere near done with stories, and we haven't even touched on some of the stuff that we've done together, really, other than me attending the Bret Kepner Drag Racing School.
I apologize. One of the listeners a couple of weeks ago had said he wanted to hear about my top 3 favorite races or whatever. I don't know that I have a top 3, but there is one that came to mind that I promise you nobody knows about this race. But it's probably one of the best of the 4,000 that I've been to. So we'll talk about that later.
Absolutely. Bret, you're the man. Thank you. And this will not be the last time we do this. And we will talk before the Thanksgiving.
Sounds
and
good,
everybody
buddy.
on the thank you very much. Happy Thanksgiving. One last thing. We are so excited, proud, and happy that Dom Lagana is home. Amazing. Absolutely incredible. If you don't believe in miracles, that is a miracle that dude is home. And I'm excited about it. He'll be back at the racetrack before you know it. Folks, thank you for tuning in. Bret, you're the best. We're not done with this by no stretch of the imagination. Everybody, see you next week.